From the Lean Enterprise Institute in Boston, this is the WLEI podcast, where we share stories of people making the world better through lean thinking and practice. For more information about LEI, including how we can help you apply lean thinking, please visit lean.org.
Hey everybody. So welcome to the WLEI podcast from the Lean Enterprise Institute. This is going out as part of our weekly newsletter, The Management Brief, about all things lean leadership and lean management. I'm Josh Howell, and today I'm joined by my co-host Mark Reich. And today we're speaking with Jamie Bonini, the president of the Toyota Production System Support Center, otherwise known as TSSC. The topic for our conversation today is the role of internal continuous improvement groups, whatever they may be called. Continuous improvement team, lean team, OpEx team, TPS group. There's all sorts of options out there. And with Jamie, we explore what the purpose of these groups typically is, and perhaps what it should be, at least in Jamie's opinion. We talk about how they often act as trainers, act as firefighters, and that perhaps there's an expanded, more valuable purpose that groups like that can define for themselves and contribute to their organizations. Jamie brings a unique perspective to this topic as both a member of the leader of the TSSC group within Toyota, but also as somebody familiar with the internal continuous improvement function that Toyota itself has. Yes, in fact, even after all these decades, Toyota still has an internal TPS group to support the organization. But also, Jamie, in his role as the president of TSSC, gets to interact with many organizations who themselves have continuous improvement groups or who don't, and get the help of the TSSC organization that Jamie's a part of to build their own internal improvement group. So Jamie's got lots of experience on this topic, a broad perspective, seeing all across the lean community. And Mark and I are thrilled to have Jamie with us today to explore this topic. So with that, let's dive in. So to get started, Jamie, how about you introduce yourself, give us a bit of an overview of your career, and specifically tell us about your career at Toyota, how you got started, and how you came to lead the Toyota Production System Support Center, or TSSC group.
Great. Well, I've been at Toyota going on my 24th year, and this is my 15th year in the Toyota Production System Support Center. I joined Toyota after spending about 15 years at Chrysler and DaimlerChrysler. 10 of those years were studying TPS in great depth and applying it as a plant manager of a 2,000-person van plant, and then applying lean product and process development for the design and development for the engine that went into the BMW Mini Cooper in 2002. So I studied TPS from afar, from outside Toyota, all kinds of different methods, books, and working with former Toyota folks. And then I joined Toyota. Again, this is going on my 24th year. And when I joined Toyota, I started in this group in TSSC. I came right to the company. Mr. Oba hired me. He was the president at that time. Then I worked in a powertrain plant. Then I worked with very high-risk suppliers for about 7 years, where I was mentored by a very famous Toyota executive, Mr. Sakia. And then I've spent the last 16 years in our different TPS groups, and the last going on 15 in TSSC, and I've been the president now for 3 years.
Outstanding. And I think full disclosure on this one. So I'm, as usual, joined by my co-host, Mark Reich. And some people will know this, but prior to joining LEI in Mark, 2011, prior to that, you had served as the general manager of the TSSC group. I think you were succeeded by Jamie, who was general manager. And then, as you just mentioned, Jamie, 3 years ago, I guess, or so, you became the president of that group. So nice. You guys have some shared history that hopefully we can tap into a bit for our conversation today. All right, Jamie, so come back to you. What would you say are some early experiences? Could have been with Toyota, could have been at Chrysler. As you mentioned, you were applying TPS while you were there also, but some early experiences that shaped your thinking about the purpose and the practice of TPS.
There are a number of them, Josh, but I think I'll focus on one that was most vivid. I had studied Toyota as best I could for a decade before I joined Toyota. And I thought I understood TPS reasonably well after working really hard at it. And when I joined TSSC in early part of the 2000s, after my first 6 months in TSSC and got some exposure to Mr. Minura, who was the president of Toyota TEMA, Toyota Engineering Manufacturing North America, and was a disciple of Taiichi Ono. I was absolutely stunned and amazed by how much more there was to TPS than I was able to learn by reading externally and even working with former Toyota people that were helping us when I was at Chrysler and DaimlerChrysler. And I was particularly stunned by, I did a Kaizen project in a powertrain plant for about 6 weeks. And then Mr. Minora came in and walked through and took a look at what we were doing. And I was just completely in awe about what he was able to see and detect and coach me on in just taking a look at something for about 10 or 15 minutes. So I very quickly realized that as much as my hard work had happened, I was joining Toyota as a very, very much a beginner. That really stunned me. It was a big surprise in my early part of the company.
Aside from Mr. Minera, would there be any other key mentors or other kind of main influences that have struck you since your time with Toyota or with TSSC?
Many. Well, I have a list. I can maybe rattle off folks that I think I learned a lot from that I'm very grateful to. So Mr. Minora, of course, was a huge impact. Mr. Oba, who was the original president, I'm very grateful for bringing me into Toyota. Ken Fukunaga was the general manager at TSSC at that time. He was a terrific mentor and teacher of mine. He was really grateful for that. Then I went down to TMMK. Gary Combus was the president there. He was involved in bringing me down there, helped me out enormously when I was assistant general manager in the powertrain plant. And to this day, I still work with him. He's on the board with some TSSC company. He's been a terrific coach. And of course, I worked for Mr. Sakia for 7 years. He has a very strong personality, but was a fantastic teacher about problem solving. And I learned an incredible amount from him. I had a chance to work with Akinori Saito, who Mark knows quite well, who worked in TSSC in the early days. He was one of the predecessors here at TSSC. I learned a lot from him about taking TPS to non-manufacturing and nonprofits. And then I say one of the folks that had the most influence on me, but not by a lot of direct content, would be Fujio Cho. And the reason for that is when I went down to TMMK, I got to meet a lot of people that work with me in my group, and they all revered Mr. Cho. Over and over again, people revered him. And I was just stunned at how a senior leader could be so revered and so respected, and his mannerisms. And Mr. Sakia was a colleague of Mr. Cho. And Mr. Sakia said that Mr. Cho was just a unique, very special person. There may never be anybody like him. So I've always aspired, my sort of benchmark to try to be a good leader is Mr. Cho, because he had a way of helping people learn and challenge them in a way that they loved the learning experience. And I experienced that when I had a chance to meet him in Japan once when we were talking about some of our TSSC stuff. And I think he just has a magic touch. Those would be some of the folks that have had a big influence.
It's an incredible list.
I want to say something.
Please.
It's kind of like shocking. Our list is almost exactly the same, Jamie. I mean, the only difference, and including the whole Mr. Cho thing, I came into TSSC literally just as Mr. Cho was moving out of Georgetown and moving back to Japan. And so my contact, like you, was less frequent. I didn't work as closely with Mr. Sakia. But I would add to my list probably Mr. Yokoi and who you know. And that's otherwise most of those people you just listed and I didn't work so closely with Mr. Sakia as you did. But everyone else I think we're groomed the same way. So I wonder if we came out the same way.
Yeah, another one I'll add to that list that is would be Simon Nagata, who was senior vice president of purchasing and later the team of president that I worked with, and I was working with Mr. Saki. I just thought he was a spectacular embodiment of the Toyota way and just really terrific. I've been blessed, learned from a lot of great folks.
Yeah, it's an amazing list from both of you guys. So for those who may be listening that are unfamiliar with TSSC, Jamie, could you explain a little bit about what TSSC does, what its mission is, how it defines its purpose?
Yeah, so TSSC is called the Toyota Production System Support Center. It is a nonprofit subsidiary of Toyota that was started in 1992 with the mission of sharing the Toyota production system in North America with companies and nonprofits as a means of social contribution or corporate philanthropy. So there are only two of these groups in the world that are authorized to systematically share the Toyota production system outside Toyota. And initially, we did quite a bit of work with suppliers. That's now in a different group. And so today, we focus on working with companies and with nonprofits, entirely externally to Toyota.
Fantastic. So for those companies, those nonprofits that TSSC engages with, could you talk a little bit about how you typically work with those organizations? And maybe even a little bit more specifically, in addition to companies and nonprofits, what kinds of companies or organizations inside those broader categories do you guys tend to focus on?
Well, we work with nonprofits and with companies. In the nonprofit space, there's a whole variety from healthcare to hospitals to assisted living to volunteer-based clinics. We've done a lot of work with food banks, a lot of work with governments and administrative processes, battered women's shelters, COVID vaccination sites, driver's license processes, all sorts of nonprofits, Meals on Wheels, all sorts of nonprofits. And when we work with them, where TPS or lean is typically newer to those types of organizations, hasn't had as deep roots as it does in the industrial sector, we'll work with them and find an urgent business need, something that they need to improve, that they're going to work on whether we work with them or not. And the idea is to overlay or add some TPS and continuous improvement principles to work that they're already doing to help them achieve an important goal or result. And with companies, all sorts of different companies, from large to small, all sorts of different segments, from startups to large companies making all kinds of different products. The approach is kind of similar. We start off with a small project that's based on a business need, and then we learn TPS together in terms of how it applies to their company and their business sector. And then after we learn some things together, we'll decide where and how to spread TPS if it's a good fit.
Yeah, just a piece of commentary from me, having had the privilege to get to know and work with people like you, Jamie, and Mark, you as well. I'm always struck by how consistently kind of Toyota, ex-Toyota folks kind of start by thinking about or identifying what is the business need. And it's a pattern of sort of thinking and acting that I'm often kind of realizing isn't necessarily so consistent, like across our improvement or lean community, but has been quite consistent, at least in my experience, with Toyota folks. Okay, so you mentioned about companies being kind of a right fit to either support initially or to support with the spread of TPS after some initial activity. So my question is, what would you say TSSC looks for when it comes to assessing a company's fit or their readiness for learning and putting into practice TPS?
Well, let me start off by saying that when we go to work with organizations, it's very common that their initial idea about what is lean or the Toyota production system and how we think about it, there can often be a pretty big gap. So our definition of TPS is an organization-wide culture of highly engaged people that are solving problems and innovating to drive performance. Culture of highly engaged people solving problems and innovating to drive performance. And that culture is created by the system of philosophy, technical practices, and a managerial role. That very broad definition that has three pieces to the system, often people's initial understanding or where they're coming from is a different definition, that typically a narrower. So we come in and first of all, that's a starting point. Are you interested in building a culture of highly engaged people that are solving problems to drive performance? And these highly engaged people are fanatics, really highly engaged, high energy about coming work to do their work and making their work better. That's what we're after. So first, are we aligned on that basic idea? And that's the first criteria. And then if we are, the second piece that we look for is our experience, or certainly my experience in 15 years, over and over and over again, and Mr. Saito shared he had very similar experiences. Almost always, if we work on a project together, 6 to 9 months in, the company or organization will have a different understanding about TPS than they did at the beginning, and we will have a different understanding about the company's needs and their challenges and the fit. So we're actually looking for a meaningful starter project that can get going, and knowing that the real critical conversation and planning is likely to happen 6 or 9 months down the road. So that's another thing we keep in mind, that things will evolve. Beyond that, here's what we look for. Can TPS deliver compelling business results? Is it a good strategic fit? If it's not a good strategic fit, it doesn't make sense. And are they able to provide, is the timing right that this can work given other business priorities? If a company is in the middle of a merger or an acquisition or downsizing, we're not likely to get executive level proper focus and attention to do this. So we look for timing and strategic fit. We look for the values of the company. Are they aligned pretty well with the TPS values? So those are the sort of things we look at to do this pilot or starter project. And then after 6 to 9 months, we're in a better place to figure out where to go, how to grow and scale, or this isn't going to be a good fit. And then we've invested some time, but we've determined it isn't a good fit or the timing isn't good.
Okay. Thanks for the explanation on TSSC. Long time ago, since my association with that organization, I've always felt it has a pretty unique mission. And as I've encountered hundreds of organizations and shared that role and seen what other organizations do, it's pretty unique, I think, in the world that Toyota has decided to do something like the work that you do. But what I do see that's pretty common in organizations I interact with is they often have an internal TPS group or internal OPEX group. They're referred to differently, lean group. And sometimes they're actually surprised Toyota has one too. And oh, I thought Toyota already did it. So they don't need, they do TPS, so they don't need a group. But in fact, that's not true. So I think we want to hear a little bit from you and I know you've had association with this organization as well too. There's an internal group, OMDD, that supports operations inside the company. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about OMDD and its purpose in Toyota, particularly in North America.
Sure. So we basically have two TPS groups. One is what we're talking about, TSSC, that works entirely outside Toyota and non-Toyota environments, is sort of corporate philanthropy. And then our internal group, they work in a whole variety of internal operations. They work in our plants to coach, mentor, and help drive improvements in response to business needs. They work with some suppliers. They work with our logistics. They work with service and parts. They've done some work with our dealers. So sort of anything internally to Toyota, and even the administrative functions like in our headquarters, they will handle the TPS support work for internal operations. And then sort of the group I'm part of is sort of external. And there's some significant differences in those environments, but that's how we have it. That's how that works.
I'm sure this is of extreme interest to our listeners. If you could provide a little bit more context to what does OMDD specifically do relative to those groups you're talking about? Like, what's their approach?
So OMDD is Operations Management Development Division. So they're really trying to develop people. And as we're on this call, know that TPS is 80% hands-on learn by doing. It's experiential learning. It's learning through practice. So they will run a series of 1 week long workshops that are spaced out a month apart that they will be part of, and there'll be people from their host environment will be involved, and they'll do intense process improvement over a week-long period with homework and follow-up. And then they'll have another workshop, and then homework and follow-up on another workshop. So if you're a participant from a plant that is learning or deepening your TPS skills, you might be involved in a 3 or 4 month development process that has the main events are these 3 week workshops that OMDD plans and sets up and mentors people improve that. So they'll do that. They'll also do things like if we have to do a very quick tack time change in a plant, or we have a capacity constraint, they'll supplement the internal resources in the plant to add some added TPS support to help do that. They'll also be involved in new plant design and layout and things about that way up front, all these sorts of activities.
Great. That's a really good summary. So maybe for the audience then, going back to what you first said, maybe you can distinguish how is your approach at TSSC different from what you just described then?
Yeah. So the basic difference is, I describe TPS as an organizational culture of how they engage people, and it's created by a system of 3 parts: a philosophy that underlies the system, some technical tools and practices, principally around just-in-time and Jidoka, and a managerial role, which is to design an organizational structure and develop people who are capable of solving problems one by one as they occur. Internally to Toyota, that philosophy, there are many mechanisms that philosophy is reinforced and takes roots, principally through the Toyota way. So at Toyota, if you're a TPS person, you're going into an environment that the Toyota way and that basic philosophy already has some deep roots in different methods. And then the managerial role is also well established. We have an organizational structure with a team leader structure and a proper span of control. And the expectation is of leaders is you're going to coach and develop people on problem solving and improvement. So those things already exist. 2 sides of the triangle, there's already some pretty good foundation that have taken root. And so the OMDD people tend to have to focus mostly, but not exclusively, on the technical piece of TPS. Outside Toyota in TSSC, we have to work on all 3 sides of the triangle. We have to help the philosophy take deeper root and meaning to an organization, and I can describe some examples of that. So we have to put much more work in that. And the managerial role typically needs a lot of attention, design of the organizational structure, and the role as leaders of coaching and development people. So I would say the basic difference is the emphasis in TSSC has to be more on all 3 sides of the triangle, and OMDD is able to put much more emphasis on the technical piece and doesn't have to, because of the environment, as much on the philosophy of the managerial role to sort of leverage what exists there or reinforce.
That's a great summary. Thank you. So you kind of spoke to it just now for a moment. Like I had mentioned earlier, we encounter a fair number of organizations that have some level of established, and I'm sure you do too, established continuous improvement group when you begin to encounter them. So and in that context, we see a wide range of approaches. Based on your experience, what do you see as the most common roles those teams play and some of the pitfalls they have?
Great. Well, let me make a big picture comment and then narrow it down. When I first started studying TPS intensely, starting in about 1993 or 94 at Chrysler and DaimlerChrysler, TPS and Lean was fairly new. The machine that changed the world had just gotten written. TSSC was just launching and getting started. And most organizations did not have an OpEx or continuous improvement group. This was all new. And thankfully, today, most organizations we visit have some form of a continuous improvement group. There is some value on this function that has been established. I think that's in North America and globally, which is fantastic. That the need for that function is recognized and staffed. What we find is typically, and this varies company to company, so there's a small number of people that are very enthusiastic about lean or continuous improvement, and they're in a company, and Their role typically is, I'm not saying all the case, more of a training function and a coaching and support function, which is needed and can be helpful. But in most cases, I think a lot more can be done. And I think the main gap, Mark and Josh, is that companies, in many cases, see TPS or lean as a collection of tools to be installed, which is very different than a culture to build. And therefore, the groups are not fully equipped or set up or expected to work very intensely on building a culture of highly engaged people solving problems to drive performance. They're not always expected to work with very senior leaders and coach and teach them how to solve problems in a collaborative way. I don't think at companies enough, the people that they're putting in these groups are high potential people that they think will be running the company in senior positions down the road. So I think those are opportunities for those groups to be more effective and more useful to the company.
Well, let's delve into that for a moment. When training kind of becomes the main purpose, what do you kind of feel is missing?
If you focus on training, the weakness is you're not going to build this culture of highly engaged, passionate people solving problems to drive performance. And you can go into any organization that you have, and you can just feel that. You can work with the team leaders and the supervisors and the managers and say, what are you working on? What problems are you solving? How are things improving? You can go to daily management boards. You can go see all kinds of things and feel, are people coming to work every day to do their work and make it better? And are they passionate about it? And people that are, they won't let you leave. They'll say, here's what I'm working on now. Here's what I'm working on next. Here's what I'm working on next. That's what we want to try to create. And if the training is helping to create that, fantastic. But some cases, I think it can fall short.
Well, we also see situations, I think, where there is the OpEx team or the continuous improvement group is more engaged.
Yeah.
But to some extent, they end up owning problem solving instead of the line leaders. What
right.
you see as some of the risks of that?
Yeah, that's a huge risk because with TPS, the role of a leader in the managerial side of the triangle is to coach and develop and teach people to solve problems, to develop their problem solving skill. And that, for the most part, has to come from their manager. The people that I rattled off that were fantastic mentors for me at Toyota are all very good at problem solving and very good at teaching people to problem solve. And when I joined Toyota, I was shocked that there were people that were this late in their career and that had that level of depth of skill that they had learned over many years. So that's the challenge, is to take a person that hasn't been brought up in this problem solving culture, mid-career leader or senior leader, and build solid basic problem solving skills to supplement their other general business knowledge, which is important. I think that's a huge challenge outside Toyota.
So Jamie, then in your view, if you could just kind of summarize, what would you say you believe from your experience the role of an internal continuous improvement group should be?
The internal continuous improvement group, their role should be, one, a development ground to develop senior talent for the future, where you move people through that have great potential to stay and grow and be with the company, that can be in this continuous improvement group for a period of time and develop some deeper skills that then when they go back into line and operating management have those skills that are deeper. So it should definitely be a development ground for people to rotate in and out of, to be skills to be future leaders. So I think that would be one.
That's great.
Number two, it should be to work with side by side or by coaching very senior leaders to build their problem solving and TPS skills so they can lead effectively. So senior management development and rotation for senior people. And the third, they should be able to work with line operations jointly to help address urgent business problems by applying TPS principles to problems that are at hand. And fourth, they should be a partner at the table for the company's strategy and direction. Those would be, I think, the four things that, if those are in pretty good place, There are probably some more I'll think of later, but I think those are 4 critical ones.
I think those are pretty good. I think in my experience, the people who are in those groups today would strongly agree that there should be some of the roles they should play. Unfortunately, as we've already covered, that's not often what we see. We see gaps relative to what you've just described, Jamie. And I'm often wondering, are those gaps there simply because that group's not being given the opportunity, or are those gaps there because perhaps the group's not capable, themselves? I mean, is there some sort of self-development that would be required in order to be given the opportunity to sort of sit at those tables, the strategic table, for example, that you mentioned? So I guess with that kind of purpose defined, maybe you could say a little bit more about how, whether it's the OMDD group or the TSSC group, how it is that you go about building the capability in leaders and managers rather than just simply getting business results.
I'll talk about the TSSC area because that's where I have the
Sure. Makes sense.
hands-on, speak to my own personal experience. So your question was, how do we develop leaders at companies?
Yeah, I guess, what's your process? What's your method for going about building capability in leaders, in managers, rather than just delivering business results, let's say?
Yeah. And so typically, if we work with a company or a nonprofit, we've got a 9 to 12 month initial project where we're going to try to get business results in that area. And we also want to develop leaders to hopefully sustain and spread TPS, or to learn enough about TPS that they can decide this isn't a good fit. So we got 2 things. We're developing leaders and we're getting business results. We want to do both of those. Both of them are important. So with that in mind, the business results are all about mapping out a process, coming with a Kaizen strategy, focusing on a handful of items that you can execute over a period of time by building certain basic capabilities that are aligned with the business result. There's some, TPS skills to be able to diagnose and assess that are important. But on the leadership side, what we typically find that we need to do is we need to help the leaders learn how to solve problems and how to coach people and solve problems. And we've all learned that you learn problem solving by hands-on, by doing, and the concepts are very simple. But when you actually go out and solve problems, it gets a lot messier and it's more difficult than it thinks. I'm typically very involved in this myself. We will take the very senior executives at a company and we will do a 3 or 4 day intense workshop where they are solving problems if it's a factory environment, on the shop floor, and they'll be working on solving problems and we'll be coaching them through them for 3 to 4 days. And then they'll have some homework and follow up for other problems they want to solve. I found that's very effective. Executives are very busy. If you design a 3 or 4 day process that is respectful of their time, and if you're asking them to solve problems that are at a lower, more detailed level than they're used to, you have to make sure, why are we doing that? So that it can garner their attention. And so there's some care that needs to be taken to do that. But almost always when we do that, I've been involved in this frequently at the end of the week, almost all the time we get the same feedback, which is, wow, we have a lot more problems out there than I had realized that can be solved. There's a lot more improvement potential than I realized. This problem solving method concept's pretty simple, how many steps you use and how you do it. But the trick is actually the practice in doing it and gaining some skill. So it looks deceptively simple, but the actual practice is difficult. And if we want our people to be able to do this type of problem solving on a regular basis, we are going to really have to provide management that's going to support and develop them in that. And that's what we want to get the leaders to that point. So we're aligned on that role of the leaders.
Jamie, when do you think it's appropriate for these continuous improvement teams to take on problem solving directly versus when would you say it's more appropriate for them to sort of take a step back and provide more of a support to those direct problem solvers?
I think Josh, it's a great question. I think it's situationally specific. I mean, what you want is you want the team leader, supervisor, manager structure to be running a process where lots of problems become visible as it's running, and that people are responding to those problems and preventing them from happening again. And by massive amount of reoccurrence prevention, you get better and better performance. This is fundamentally a problem-solving system. So you can put a bunch of tools in place that will bring problems to the surface, which is very important. The key question is, are people able to solve those problems, many of them, one by one as they occur, to prevent them from happening again? And as you diagnose that, then you can determine where to intervene to make that work more effectively. But I don't see that the continuous improvement people should be solving those problems, because they're not going to be there on an ongoing basis. They ultimately have to develop the problem-solving capability in the line management. And that problem-solving capability, as I've said before, has to come with these people are engaged to solving problems. They're getting fulfillment out of solving the problem. This is bringing meaning to their work. And that's part of the magic of TPS. When you can make that happen, it becomes a virtuous cycle that people are seeing problems, solving problems, making it better, and they're fulfilled by that. That needs to come from the management. So the degree to which the OpEx group helps with that depends on where the group is. I have found some cases when I'm working with executives where we'll have the leaders and the OpEx people work on teams of 2 to 3 people and solve problems together. And we'll do that as a team, but it's got to be real careful that the executives don't delegate all the problem solving to the CI person. So they think the goal is to solve the problem. We have to remind them the goal isn't to solve the problem as much as it is to learn how to solve problems. And that requires good collaboration and trust and things like that.
That's great. So then for groups like this, for continuous improvement groups that are wanting to evolve kind of beyond simply being a training group, or beyond being kind of the firefighters that are expected to come in and put out all fires or solve all problems, and instead become capability builders, as we've talked about, what would be some practical first steps that a group like that could take, Jamie, to get on that path of transformation, you could say?
I think from my experience, the most critical piece of that path, this is going to sound very trite, but that the very senior people and that continuous improvement group are aligned on what they mean by continuous improvement and TPS, and be real clear about that so that their role can be played. I just described to you how we see TPS at Toyota. It's driven by line management. Line management has a coaching and development role. We want people in line management to see and solve problems. We want highly engaged people. That's different than I want a team of people that can come in and break bottlenecks and do analysis and break bottlenecks. It's a very different role and scope. So I think having alignment up front about the role and the scope is important. I will make a comment on this, Josh. We have, as you know, in the last 2 years since COVID, launched a variety of what we call TPS tours at our plants that are in 4-hour and 8-hour durations. And we've had senior people from a lot of companies, and we've had a lot of academics come. And it's been very rewarding. And it is very, very, very common that we hear at the end, Jamie, I have been studying Lean and TPS for a long time. And what you're describing to me about what TPS is and what it means, a culture of highly engaged people, is quite different than what I thought about it when I came here today. I've heard that over and over and over again. And that is what tells me if there's that gap of or different understanding about what TPS is all about, that has a huge consequence on what you want your CI team to do. I even had one executive at one company say, Jamie, before I came here, my CI team was supposed to do tool installations. They were going to set up huddle boards and daily huddles, and they were going to train people on problem solving. And I felt if I installed these tools, I would get this magic of continuous improvement. And now at the end of this workshop, I have a very different view of what's required. So that's where I'm coming up with those insights about alignment on what is TPS and how to go about building it and what's the role of line management.
That's a great explanation, Jamie. Kind of to wrap things up a little bit for us. Could you share with us, maybe looking back at your time at TSSC, like a specific transformation story or moment that sticks with you?
There are many, but I can tell you the one that I think was most rewarding,
Hmm.
most challenging, and most rewarding, which was when the COVID vaccine first came out. There was a very large vaccination site in Dallas at Fair Park, where the Cotton Bowl is, that they needed to ramp up from vaccinating 1,000 people a day in a walk-up clinic to 10,000 people a day, 1,000 an hour at a drive-through. This was a new site that was being launched. They were going to have about 700 people working there every day. Of those 700 people, 350 of them would be volunteers. They would volunteer for 4 hours, and then they would leave, and then another crew of volunteers would come in. So you had to vaccinate 1,000 people an hour with a new crew every 4 hours. The people that were coming to get the vaccine were mostly elderly people that were in great fear at that time. They waited hours and hours to get the vaccine. We were sent down there at TSSC and asked by the city manager to help them out to get this site launched up before we saw the tents. The site hadn't launched, and they said, hey, could you help us set up this project, help us set up this site along with about 35 other agencies. We worked with them for 3 months. I was down there 12 to 14 hours a day myself with some TSSC people for pretty much 7 days a week. It was the most rewarding thing I've ever done. We set up a team leader structure under the tents. We set up real-time problem solving. We trained people that had great people skills and problem solving acumen. And we were able to, with a great team effort with a lot of folks who were actually to build on a small scale a culture at that site of highly engaged people solving problems to drive performance. We did that as we were vaccinating. We did that with the site leadership. That was very rewarding experience, our small contribution, but also about the power building this type of culture in a crisis. And so I'll never forget that. And deeply appreciative that Toyota would allocate my time to be down there for that several months doing that, and the great people we work with.
Wow, that sounds like a really impactful story for you and for Toyota, I'm sure, and for the people who were involved in all that, as well as the people who were there waiting for their vaccines. I'm sure that was helpful.
Yeah, it was amazing.
So maybe last question, and give us a clue into what's up for you and for TSSC. What are you excited about right now? What's in the future?
I have a lot of things I'm very excited by the future. As you know, Mark, we do ocean planning, and we think 3 to 5 years out about what are the challenges and what we would do.
Great.
I'm excited about beyond the normal work that I've just described that we do, a couple of challenges and opportunities moving forward. One of them, I'm very excited about the work that we are all working on with a host of profit organizations, including LEI and the Shingo Institute and some universities and the Central Coast Lean, and that we're working together as nonprofits where we have some synergies to help move lean and continuous improvement forward. I think we're all coming at this from different angles, and we are learning a lot together, and there's some really committed people there that I enjoy working with and learning from. I think we can make some breakthroughs in this space. The main concern is that lean or TPS is a very powerful system that can be great for organizations and great for people. And many companies are not yet tapping into that potential. And I think if we work together, we can make it more accessible in different ways. And I'm excited about that synergy. I'm also very excited about learning about artificial intelligence and continuous improvement. There's a lot of energy around artificial intelligence and new technology. And it appears that right now, the folks that are working hard on artificial intelligence don't yet have a deep background in continuous improvement or lean. And I'm looking forward to working on those things together. And lastly, I'm very excited about one of our major ocean goals is to try to help address harmful misunderstandings about TPS. And we are concerned that there are harmful, damaging misunderstandings about TPS in different places, and we're trying to address that through different outreach and educational opportunities with these tours that we're doing and with academia. So all that is exciting stuff. And the last thing I would say, we have a great partnership with the Good Jobs Institute that Zeynep Tan leads, which is has the Good Jobs strategy has a lot of overlap with TPS. It's more focused on sort of a retail or service sector. And I'm excited that there's getting a lot more interest in that space. And that collaboration, I think, will be rich and rewarding. Lots to do.
That's great. It's a good list. Lots of reasons to be excited. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for agreeing to sit with Mark and I and have this conversation so that we can share more about you, more about TSSC, more about TPS, more about Toyota with our community of listeners.
I just want to say it was great having you on, Jamie. I mean, I hold my career at Toyota near and dear to, like, I felt like I was being developed every day while I was at Toyota. I always tell people that. But I have to say the core of that was my time I spent at TSSC. So it's wonderful to hear that the mission is continuing as well. And under your guidance, it's great to hear.
Well, you, Mark, and many others made a great contribution to TSSC, and we wouldn't be where we're at without a lot of people that worked a lot of hard years long before I joined it.
Yeah. So again, Jamie, thanks for today, and thanks for really, years of partnership. You mentioned the collaboration that we're both a part of. We sometimes refer to it as the Future of People at Work initiative. I'm also very excited about the opportunities and the work that we're doing together there. And then our organizations have been partnering for a number of years now, as you well know, on a at least twice annual learning tour where we come to visit Toyota at some site, most recently Georgetown, Kentucky, Toyota supplier, Summit Polymer, automotive supplier, and then our friends at GE Appliances. So anyway, I look forward to seeing you and or your team at the next tour, if I don't see you before that. And in the meantime, continue with the good work.